Hi readers, Chris here. Today, Meepers and I are going to recommend to you some spooky books to read for the Halloween season. These books are not going to be in any sort of order. They're just some of my favorites that I pulled off my shelves, and as you know me, there's a lot of fantasy in here, so apologies up front. I read a lot of fantasy. What do you think, Meeps? Do you like fantasy? Yeah? Run, Meeps, be free! So I'm just going to jump in and start with my first recommendation, which is going to be Darkcurrents by Jacquelinecarey. If you haven't read anything by Jacquelinecarey before, first of all, you're missing out. But this series in particular, it's 3 books, and it's about a young girl that lives in a fictional town where she is basically a police officer for the supernatural. So I'm just going to read the back of this book so you can get an idea of what it's about. The Midwestern resort town of Pentucket boasts a diverse population, eccentric locals, wealthy summer people, and tourists by the busload. Not to mention fairies, sprites, vampires, naiads, ogres, and a whole host of eldritch folk. Presided over by Hel, a reclusive Norse goddess. To Daisy Johansen, fathered by an incubus and raised by a single mother, it's home. And as Hel's enforcer, and designated liaison to the Pentucket Police Department, it's up to her to ensure relations between the mundane and eldritch communities run smoothly. But when a young man from a nearby college town drowns and signs point to eldritch involvement, the town's booming paranormal tourism trade is at stake. Teamed up with her childhood crush, Officer Cody Fairfax, a sexy werewolf on the down low, Daisy must solve the crime and keep a tight rein on the darker side of her nature. For if she's ever tempted to invoke her demonic birthright, it could accidentally unleash nothing less than Armageddon. This series is like Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets Law and Order. It's super, super fun. Daisy is a great character. She is super funny, super capable, super smart. This series has a little bit of everything in it. It's got, your supernatural creatures. It's got murder. It's got mystery. It's got powers. It's got romance. And it's got humor. Did I say that already? I can't remember. Anyway, this first book, Darkcurrents, is super, super fun. Definitely a recommendation from me. Next up, I have a zombie book. I've heard a lot of people talking about Pride and Prejudice and zombies lately, so that's why I'm going to recommend Dawn of the Dreadfuls. This is actually the prequel to Pride and Prejudice and zombies. So, Dawn of the Dreadfuls says, readers will witness the birth of a heroine, in Dawn of the Dreadfuls, a thrilling prequel set 4 years before the horrific events of Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. As our story opens, the Bennet sisters are enjoying a peaceful life in the English countryside. They idle away the days reading, gardening, and daydreaming about future husbands, until a funeral at the local parish goes strangely and horribly awry. Suddenly, corpses are springing up from the soft earth, and only one family can stop them. As the bodies pile up, we watch Elizabeth Bennet evolve from a naive young teenager into a savage slayer of the undead. Along the way, 2 men vie for her affections. Master Hawksworth is a powerful warrior who trains her to kill, while thoughtful Dr. Dr. Kecklepenny seeks to conquer the Walking Dead using science instead of strength. Will either man win the prize of Elizabeth's heart, or will their hearts be feasted upon by hordes of marauding zombies? Complete with romance, action, comedy, and an army of shambling corpses, Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies and Dawn of the Dead will have Jane Austen rolling in her grave and just might inspire her to crawl out of it. Yes, that's right. Both this book and Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies are not like, epic pieces of literature, but they're super, super fun, super entertaining. If you like zombies, but you also like to laugh at zombies, this is a great book to give a try. Next up, I have a vampire tale for you, and that's going to be Abraham Lincoln, a Vampire Hunter by Seth Grahame-Smith. That's right, Abraham Lincoln, as in our President Abraham Lincoln. This story follows Honest Abe in his younger years while he's off hunting vampires. Indiana, 1818. In a one-room cabin, 9-year-old Abraham Lincoln kneels at his mother's bedside. "My baby boy," she whispers before dying. Only later will grieving Abe learn that his mother's fatal affliction was actually the work of a vampire. Gifted with his legendary height, strength, and skill with an axe, young Lincoln sets out on a path of vengeance that will lead him all the way to the White House. This is such a fun book. Not only is it a fun look at like American history back in, the early 1800s, but it's just a fun read overall, because who doesn't love reading about vampires? Yes, there was a movie made about this book, and if you've seen the movie, please don't let that judge your enjoyment of this book. Give it a try, because as usual, the book is so much better. Next up, if you're looking for something a little bit more dark and atmospheric, I've got Lost by Gregory Maguire. You might recognize Gregory Maguire's name because he wrote the Wicked series of books about the Wicked Witch from the West. And yeah, sure, it's got a witch in it. That's probably a good book to read for, Halloween. But Lost, I think, just has that little bit of atmospheric nature to it, which you'll see in a minute as I read the flap for you. Winifred Rudge, a bemused writer, struggles to get beyond the runway success of her mass market and astrology book, travels to London to jumpstart her new novel about a woman who's being haunted by the ghost of Jack the Ripper. Already you can see where this is going. Upon her arrival, she finds that her step-cousin, an old friend, John Comister, has disappeared, and a ghostly presence seems to have taken over his apartment in the 19th century row house once owned by Winnie's great-great-grandfather. Is the spirit of this ancestor, who, family legend claimed, was Charles Dickens's childhood inspiration for Ebenezer Scrooge, or could it be the ghostly remains of Jack the Ripper? Or a phantasm derived from a more arcane and insidious nature? Winnie begins to investigate, but John's erstwhile girlfriend, Allegra, is aggressively unhelpful, and his downstairs neighbor, the cat-obsessed Mrs. Mattingly, is growing stranger by the day. Gripped by inspiration and desperation alike, Winnie finds herself the unwilling audience for a drama of specters and shades, some from her family's peculiar history and some from her own vanquished past. So Lost is a little bit A Christmas Carol, a little bit Jack the Ripper, totally inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. This is a great, dark, dreary London tale. It's got everything you could want from a spooky perspective, the dark London streets, the fog. If you haven't heard of this one and are looking for something spooky to read, this would be a great pick. Next up, I'm going back to something a little bit sillier, and that's going to be A Dirty Job by Christopher Moore. Christopher Moore has a ton of great, funny supernatural books. So we've got Bite Me, Blood-Sucking Fiends, You Suck. A Dirty Job is about a young man named Charlie Asher. Charlie Asher is a pretty normal guy with a normal life, married to a bright and pretty woman who actually loves him for his normalcy. They're about to have their first child. Yes, Charlie's doing okay, until people start dropping dead around him, and everywhere he goes, a dark presence whispers to him from under the streets. Charlie Asher, it seems, has been recruited for a new position as Death. That's right, it's a dirty job, but hey, someone's got to do it. So Charlie becomes the new Death. That means he's going to be responsible for helping souls cross over. Shenanigans ensues. It is a great book. He's also got a baby daughter who, I love the cover of this book. It's so funny. If that gives you any indication of how this book goes, super funny, super great. I love Christopher Moore's humor and his style of writing. So if you're looking for something funny to read this Halloween, this would be a great pick for you. Next up, I have a YA fantasy that I can't talk about enough or say enough good things about, and that is The Diviners by Libbabray. I will say my friend Reading Nymph just recently read this book and talked about it in one of her reading blogs. I'm going to link that video in the description down below if you want to go check it out. This is a great tale. It takes place in like the 1920s New York during Prohibition era, and it's so much fun. So this one, our main character is Evie O'Neill. Evie O'Neill has been exiled from her boring old hometown and shipped off to the bustling streets of New York City, and she is positively ecstatic. It's 1926, and New York is filled with speakeasies, Ziegfeld girls, and rakish pickpocketers. The only catch is that she has to live with her Uncle Will and his unhealthy obsession with the occult. Evie worries he'll discover her darkest secret, a supernatural power that has only brought her trouble so far. But when the police find a murdered girl branded with a cryptic symbol and Will is called to the scene, Evie realizes her gift could help catch a serial killer. As Evie jumps headlong into a dance with a murderer, other stories unfold in the city that never sleeps. A young man named Memphis is caught between two worlds. A chorus girl named Theta is running from her past. A student named Jericho hides a shocking secret. And unknown to all, something dark and evil has awakened. If that doesn't sound amazing, I don't know what does. This book, like by the time it got to the end, like actually gave me the heebie-jeebies. It's got such great atmosphere, it's got such great tension, and it has such great characters, such a great setting, such a great backdrop. I cannot say enough good things about the Diviners and the whole Diviners series. So if you're looking for a YA fantasy that also has some, horror elements into it, definitely pick up the Diviners. Next up, I had a couple classics I was going to mention. I don't talk about classics on my channel a lot because honestly, I don't really like them. I'm sorry. Because I was forced to read so many of them in school, I'm like, oh, I don't have to be forced to do that anymore. But there are still a handful out there that I still actually like. So if you're looking for a classic tale, classic horror, classic gothic, something like that, I cannot recommend Edgar Allan Poe enough. This is like a complete works of his, and no, I have not read everything in here, but I do have a couple favorites. Of course, there's The Raven, which I think everyone, even if you haven't read it, you know about it, quote The Raven nevermore. But if you've never read it, I do recommend, if you're going to read anything by Edgar Allan Poe, I would say The Raven and then The Telltale Heart are probably the two that you should definitely read. Both because there are really great examples of Poe's style and his work, and also they're creepy and great, and they're about horror and death and murder and all sorts of fun stuff that some of us love, be included. So Edgar Allan Poe, if you're looking for something more classic to sink your teeth into, your fangs, this is where I would start. Again, he's got a lot of poems and short stories, so it won't take a lot of time if you're just looking for something super quick, or you could probably spend a whole year reading nothing but Edgar Allan Poe. Totally up to you. Finally, I've come to my last recommendation for the spooky season. This is one of my favorite vampire tales of all time, besides Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that's going to be Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. What did I Interview with the Vampire? Yeah, I tried to combine Anne Rice and vampire. Interview with the Vampire. First of all, if you've never seen the movie, this is also a fantastic movie. Yes, it is a little bit slow because it's dated now, but it's got such great acting, such great costumes, such great atmosphere, and it's totally awesome. Christian Slater is super hot in it. Tom Cruise is super hot in it. Brad Pitt, also super hot in it. Everyone is super hot in it. If you can't tell, that's what I'm trying to say. If you're not familiar with Interview with the Vampire, we have a young man in the movie that's played by Christian Slater. He's a journalist, and he finds out that vampires actually exist. And he ends up meeting up with this vampire named Lestat. He goes to Lestat's home, and he decides he's going to interview Lestat about his life. So Lestat goes into talking about his entire life, and Lestat he's had a very long life from the time he was turned into a vampire until current times. And it sounds like a real simple premise when I'm saying it like that, but Lestat is such a fascinating character. Because on one hand, he is like very much one of those characters that's like, you don't know if he's good or evil. And I mean, yes, he makes a lot of bad decisions in the book, and he kind of comes off as a jerk. He's definitely a roguish character, an anti-hero, and rides the line with villain. I think he crosses the line into villain most of the time, if not all the time. But there's still something about him because he is so charming and so charismatic that you just can't help but like fall in love with him. So even though he is like kind of a like horrible person, horrible vampire, like you just can't, he has this way of hypnotizing people and making them fall in love with him. That's how he gets, you know, turns other people into vampires. That's how he, you know, he lives his life very frivolously for a long time, not caring about others' feelings. Yeah, it's such a great book. It's such a great tale. I feel like I'm not doing it justice. But if you've seen the movie, it's like the movie, like, even better. Because, you know, books are always better than the movies. But in this case, I really like this movie, too. It has a very nostalgic place in my heart. So I would recommend actually reading the book, then watching the movie. Because I think that movie is worth watching at some point. So Jack says, that is all for today. Those are all our spooky picks. Thank you, Jack. Aw, you give us such nice kisses. Thank you. You're such a good boy. Aw. So while Jack continues cleaning my face, those are all my recommendations for spooky season this year. I want to know what kind of spooky books you're reading this year. So let Jack and I know in the comments section below which spooky books you would recommend for us to read. All right, everyone. Happy reading. Oh, and I forgot to say, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. Me and Jack and Meepers do new videos every Sunday. I know technically it's Monday today, but Wednesday and sometimes on Friday. All right, everyone, say thanks for watching. Bye.